誰の鞘だって言ってるんだ。
それがな、あんたなんだ、原田くん。
Oh. Of all the people to try and frame for murder, Harada?
なんだ、佐野さんが切ったんだ。僕も呼んでほしかったな。
バカ言え。問題の俺の鞘はここにあるんだぜ。話にもならないな。
He threw up his hands in exasperation. Inoue smiled faintly and nodded.
私もみんなも最初から疑ってないよ。だが世間が信じてくれるかわからんのが困るな。先方も犯人を絞りきれないのだろうね。紀州藩の三浦九太郎が新選組に依頼して暗殺したって話もあったよ。
Miura. That was the man Nagkur had mentioned. He had some sort of personal quarrel with Sakamoto, which made him a suspect.
新選組の仕業にしたいやつもいるだろうしな。つっても俺たちが知らない以上、新選組が手を下したわけねえよ。
三男さんが勝手に動いたんだとしたら別ですけどね。
The room fell silent.
三男さんは大丈夫なのか。俺らから見ても最近の夜の巡察はやり方がひでえぜ。
It was true that Sinan had been acting stranger and stranger. Although she didn't want to believe it, she had to admit that it wasn't that difficult to imagine him doing something like that. She passed him on occasion in the hallways. His eyes were dry and thirsty, as if he was always hungry for blood.
俺らで気をつけるしかねえよ。羅刹隊の存在を表に出すわけにはいかねえし。
その件についてだが、
近藤さんと土方さんって
斉藤、なんでここにいんだよ。
She rubbed vigorously at her eyes, looked, then did it again. But there was no doubt. The man who'd followed Kanto and Hijikata into the room was the man who'd left to join the guardians of the Imperial Tomb, Saito himself.
おや、斉藤くんじゃないか。久しぶりだね。ご両英治の方はどうしたんだい？
ごちゃごちゃうるせえな。許すも何も。本日付で斉藤は新選組に復帰すんだよ。
Oh, well, what?
いや、ちょっと待った土方さん。俺たち的には嬉しい頼りだけどよ。それじゃあご両英治っつうか伊藤派の立場は？
It was Saito who answered.
まずそこから訂正を。俺はもともと伊藤派ではない。
斉藤君はな、都市の名誉を受けて患者として伊藤派に混じっていたんだよ。
And with that, everything suddenly made sense. They said that to fool your enemy, you must first fool your allies. And Saito had been doing just that.
なんだ斉藤君、僕に内緒でそんなに楽しいことしてたんだね。
さっきは肝が冷えたぜ。近藤さんたちも人が悪いよ。
極秘だったんでな。黙っていてみんなにはすまんことをしたな。
It was a surprise, to be sure, but she was glad they'd have Saito back with them again. She gave him a tentative smile, but he only sighed and shook his head.
安心するのは後だ。この半年、俺は五両英治として活動したが、伊藤たちは新選組に対して 明らかな敵対行動を取ろうとしている。
敵対行動とは表現からして穏やかではないようだ。
伊藤のやつは幕府を失墜させるために羅刹隊の存在を公表しようとしてやがんだ。そのために薩摩と手を組んだって話もあるな。
If the existence and creation of the monsters, Furies, was to become public knowledge, the shogunate's reputation would be irreparably damaged, and the Shinsengumi would undoubtedly suffer as well. Even she could predict that.
そしてより差し迫った問題がもう一つ。伊藤派は新選組局長暗殺計画を練っている。
Kondo's face was stern and tense, but he kept silent. He glanced over at Hijikata.
五両英二はすでに新選組潰しに動き始めている。坂本龍馬が暗殺された件を聞いたか？
ああ、なんでも俺がやったとかいう話だよな。
聞いたなら話は早い。その噂を流したのは五両英二の連中だ。紀州藩の三浦九太郎が新選組に依頼して原田に殺させたってな。
Hijikata explained that Miura insisted that he didn't do it, but is sure that someone's going to take a stab at him eventually.
三浦の警護は斎藤に頼むことになる。斎藤は周りから見ると伊藤派から出戻りしたようにしか見えねえからな。
わきまえています。ほとぼりが冷めるまで俺はここにいない方がいいでしょう。
Here, Hijikata paused for a moment. The room was utterly silent. Every one of them could sense what came next would be very, very important.
伊藤貸太郎。羅刹隊を公にするだけでなく、近藤さんの命まで狙ってるときた。
He spoke quietly, almost to himself, as if sharing a final moment with a former comrade. Then he looked up, and when he spoke, his voice was like cold steel, the voice of the demon.
残念なことだが、伊藤さんには死んでもらうしかないな。
やむを得まい。
Kondo nodded, and that was that. The Shinsengumi would kill Kashitaro Ito.
まず、伊藤を近藤さんの別宅に呼び出す。接待には俺も回る。その後、伊藤の死体を使って五両英二の連中を呼び出し、切る。実行隊は長倉、原田、お前らに頼む。
で、土方さん、僕は誰を切ればいいんですか？
おめえは寝てろ。変な咳をしやがるし、体調も悪いんだろう。まだ数日は斎藤もここにいるから相手してもらってろ。
恨みますよ、土方さん。
It all seemed very calculated for murder. She hadn't realized she'd been sitting still, dumbfounded, until she felt a gentle tap on her shoulder.
五両英二はこれで終わる。平助を呼び戻すつもりがあるなら、これが最後の機会になるだろう。
He was right. If they meant to kill the guard, that included Heisuke.
そりゃもちろん助けて。
歯向かうようなら切れ。
Hijikata showed no sign that he'd even heard her. She watched his back disappear out the door.
そんなわけがなかろう。トシだって本心では助けたいと思ってるんだ。トシには俺からも後で話しておく。
The last few words he mumbled to himself, and then coughed nervously, as if embarrassed that he'd raised his voice. It was only then that she realized how much Kondo was suffering, how much they were all suffering, even Hijikata.
いや、むしろ嬉しかったよ。平助は皆に慕われているのだな。
Kondo let out a slow breath, then looked up at her and smiled. He turned to Nagakura and Harada and spoke in a low voice.
長倉、原田。局長ではなく、近藤勇として頼む。平助を見逃してやれ。できるなら戻るように説得してほしい。
ああ。やってみる。
As they discussed the details of their orders, she sat and wondered what she could do. What could she do?
これで皆自分の役割は確認したな。質問があるなら今のうちに言っておいてくれ。
She heard herself begin to speak, her voice surprisingly calm and dignified.
手伝うと言っても今回は汚い仕事だ。正直君は関わるべきではない。
It was true. This wasn't a patrol, or even a guarding mission. This was the assassination of a former comrade, an attack on men who'd split from the Shinsengumi. She still wanted to help, yes. Still, she wanted to do what she could. It might be her last chance to see Heisuke. Oh well, nah.
あのな、今回のは使いでも遊びでもねえんだ。
一時は同志だった奴らの暗殺だ。万一があれば平助すら切ることになるかもしれないんだぞ。
She knew that the Shinsengumi had carried out these sorts of black operations before. There was no way she could have stayed with them as long as she had and not known. But that was why she simply couldn't stand by and let them shoulder all the responsibility. She had spent enough time looking away until the deed was done. No more.
決意は固いようだな。
His face had lost its usual warmth. It wasn't anger or cruelty that it showed now, but the gravity of a general addressing his men.
ならばどうする？この一件において君は何をしたいのか？
She had already decided. She would. Can either convince Heisuke, which I think would work rather well, or can help with Ito, which would probably mean basically going in as a diversion. Don't really care about Heisuke that much, honestly. That seems like the better choice, though. Nah. She would help lure Ito into the trap the Shinsengumi had planned for him. He was quite cautious at first, but after some prompting to talk about issues he was familiar with and the liberal application of alcohol, he loosened up significantly. His high spirits provided an almost sickening contrast to the fate that awaited him.
もう上位などと声高に叫んでいる場合ではございませんわ。
His laughter echoed hollowly through her skull. In his smile, she could already see the rictus grin of a corpse. They were entertaining Ito at Kondo's second home, and all night the alcohol had flown easy.
何せ長州も薩摩もこのままでは外国に対抗できぬと悟って外来の文化を取り入れ始めていますもの。
ほほう。というと、例えばどのような？
そうですわね。例えば銃よ。外国から多くの銃を取り寄せ、洋式の訓練を積んだ部隊を作っているのよ。
He nodded sagely, and gestured somewhat awkwardly with his cup. Kondo nodded solemnly in agreement.
近藤さん、これ新選組もいろいろ道を考え直した方が良さそうだな。
そうでしょう、そうでしょう。あなたたちも対局を見なさいな。
ああ、今は違う道だが、目指すところは同じだ。もう一杯どうだい、伊藤さん。
It was perfectly normal alcohol, no poison or drugs, but they were making him drunk in order to murder him. How was that any different than her pouring poison straight into his cup?
あら、震えてるわよ。大丈夫？気分でも悪いのかしら。
いやいや、心配には及ばないかと。伊藤さん相手に緊張しているのでしょう。
あらあら、私のことがそんなに気にかかるのかしら。いけない子ですこと。
確かにな、手と顔に出てるぞ。こういう場にもそろそろ慣れておけよ。たく。
The subtle message was clear. Hide your emotions, Chizuru. She swallowed and nodded. It had been her choice to help with Ito's assassination. The least she could do now was not get in the way.
まあまあ、お酒の席ですもの。固いことはいい子なしですわ。
伊藤さんは器が広いですな。
Time passed, and alcohol was drunk.
今日は有意義なお話ができましたわ。それでは、ごきげんよう。
After spending all night expounding on his theories for the advancement of Japanese society, Ito finally stumbled off into the darkness, more than a little drunk. She watched him disappear. It would be the last time she would see him alive.
後味が悪いものだな。
これが俺たちの選んだ道。俺たちの仕事だ。言われるものじゃない。こんな汚い仕事だってある。大将も、ついでにお前も、あまり深く背負い込むな。計画したのも指示したのも、俺なんだからな。
Hijikata let out a long sigh, his eyes staring off into the darkness where Ito had gone. What happened afterward was not something she cared to remember. Ito, too drunk to fight back, was quickly and easily killed by the men waiting for him. But the night was far from over. Battle and bloodshed waited at Aburano Koji for Nagakura and the men sent to ambush the guardians of the Imperial Tomb. Fate waited for Okida, convalescing at the headquarters in Fudodo village. For them, for all of them, waited a night after which nothing would be the same. The assassination of Ito and the destruction of the Guardians of the Imperial Tomb was later known as the Aburano Koji Incident. Both the Shinsengumi and guard were surprised by the sudden appearance of the Satsuma troops, and by the demons who accompanied them. Both parties had fallen for the Satsuma trap, and the battlefield was thrown into confusion. During the fight, Hakuoki was mortally wounded and had no choice but to drink the water of life and become a fury, or die. Okay, I was not expecting this. As the Battle of Aburano Koji was taking place, the headquarters of the Shinsengumi came under attack from the Chikage Kazuma. Yeah, it would have been very bad to go there. The monstrous thing her father had made was slowly devouring the Shinsengumi. How long before the water of life swallowed them whole? So, yeah, I believe I made a good decision on that part. Because, wow, that would have been bad to be on the other side. Scarcely a month had passed since Aburano Koji. Saito and Hakuoki had returned, but the Shinsengumi was hardly back to normal. A dark, tense atmosphere pervaded the compound. Many men had lost their lives in Kazuma's attacks. Even more had been injured during the attack at Aburano Koji. Among them was Hakuoki. Several of the rank-and-file soldiers had seen him mortally wounded. He had looked as if he would not survive. For that reason, Hakuoki was declared officially dead, and made a member of the Fury Corps. Saito hadn't been wounded, but many among the common soldiers began to call him a coward. To them, he had left the Shinsengumi to join Ito, then betrayed his new master when he sensed a change in fortunes. She saw no reason why he couldn't set them straight, and say that he had never truly left the Shinsengumi, but he claimed he would rather stay silent than tarnish the honor of the commander and the chief who had ordered his actions. As such, it was decided that Saito would leave the compound until tempers had been allowed to cool. He was sent to stay at Tenma in order to protect Kyutaro Miura, an official of the Kishu domain. The night of the battle at Aburano Koji was a turning point for the Shinsengumi. Just because so much actually happened there, I'm going to go ahead and stop here for now, and we'll pick it up next time. So until then, bye-bye.